Welcome to Search Talk Live with search engine optimization and marketing experts Robert O'Haver and Matt Weber. Brought to you by Pixel Cut Labs.
All right, welcome to another episode of Search Talk Live. I'm your host, Robert O'Haver, along with Matt Weber of Roar Marketing in Orlando, Florida. Matt, how's it going?
Doing fantastic, Robert. Another interesting show for you and I, just practicing safe social distancing remotely. I got to tell you, Robert, I'm doing something new this show. I saw online where folks are doing this with wired headsets, kind of going back old school to get a better sound quality. So I'm going wired for this show. I think I've almost strangled myself twice so far, and we're not even 2 minutes into the show.
Well, I tell you, that's what I'm actually using, and I've found it to be pretty good.
Yeah, and I'm watching all these people producing this content now that are streaming, and everybody's using Apple AirPods going wireless. And I thought, it's a little bit too risky for me. I'm going to see if I can go old school here and get better quality.
Yeah, you sound great.
Thank you.
All right, well, today our guest is well-diversed in the industry. His name is Greg Sterling. He is the VP Marketing Insights at Uberall. Greg, how are you?
I'm about as good as can be expected under the circumstances.
Yes, I think we all feel that.
I mean, I'm not sick, so that's good. I'm feeling pretty good.
It's definitely a plus. Well, why don't you tell our listeners about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm VP of Market Insights for Uberall. Uberall is a presence and reputation management company that works directly with multi-location brands and with small businesses through partners in North America. I joined in January, so I've only been with the company a short time. Before that, I was the VP of Insights. So many insights. Hopefully, I'll be able to bring them to you today here at an organization called the Local Search Association, which was the old Yellow Pages Association. Before that, I was a consultant and analyst for about 8 years with a couple of different companies. And way back in the old, in the Jurassic era, I was an attorney. I was a lawyer originally,
Wow.
which was kind of painful and horrible, and took all my strength to get out of that profession, but I did it. That's one of my life's great achievements.
What field of law?
I did civil litigation, a lot of different kinds over the course of about 10 years. So that's another podcast in itself.
So you're a recovering attorney, as we say.
Well, I'm pretty recovered. I mean, I've been out for 22 years pretty much. So yeah, I'm pretty recovered. Although I still think about certain situations in a lawyer-like fashion. But my sort of general area of study and kind of inquiry and research has been pretty consistent over the last 20 plus years that I've been involved in internet marketing, which is location and how consumers use the internet to make purchase decisions ultimately in the real world, which nobody is doing right now, except at grocery stores.
And I have to hand it to you, crossing that lawyerish type content versus, speaking in a normal tone, you've done an amazing job at converting from that.
Thanks. Well, it's funny. When I went to law school, it actually helped me become a better writer. One of the handful of benefits that came out of law school, you wouldn't think this, is that I became a kind of a more my writing became clear and less kind of pompous and inflated,
Mm-hmm.
So that was. But thank you. I mean, lawyers tend to think and speak in a lot of jargon and sentences with a lot of clauses, and I like to think people wouldn't identify me as a lawyer at a party or something.
Well, good to have you. And I know we've spent the last couple shows talking about what is, right now the most important topic we can talk about. The thing that's on every business owner's mind right now is how do we not only get out of the COVID-19 area, but survive and hopefully rebound even stronger. What is your sense right now of what small business owners could be doing in this time where maybe they have a little more time on their hands?
Well, I mean, the first thing that they've got to deal with is their financial situation, obviously, and that's a big topic. But in terms of, let's assume that somebody's in an okay position and not kind of bailing water out of the boat. They can certainly go deeper into internet marketing and learn how to promote themselves more effectively. I mean, I used to run a series of digital marketing courses for small businesses when I was at the local search association. So we would get businesses together and try and teach them how to do things, Google, Facebook, reputation management, et cetera. And one of the things that was clear to me is that a lot of them are trying to do everything on their own. They don't have agencies, they don't have experts in-house to do this, and so they're sort of stumbling around, trying to do it all on their own. And they often blame the platforms or the tools when they fail to achieve the results that they expect. And certainly, they can get a great deal more sophisticated with just a little bit, at least conceptually, with just a little bit more effort during this time, sort of reading the materials that are out there, trying to do a little more than they've been able to do when they've been sort of, time strapped and all.
What's the one thing you would hope that they master if they had just a limited time and a limited set of choices? They could pick one thing to master during this downtime. What would you recommend?
Well, I mean, if they're a traditional business that has a physical location, let's assume at some point that the world opens back up and we all go back into the sunshine and can go to restaurants and dry cleaners and all these places. They Google My Business and Google is sort of the number one thing that they need to understand and deal with. Facebook is very important. Email marketing is important, but really it's Google My Business, and that encompasses reputation management.
You actually, I think, co-authored or participated in an article that made the position that even Google's own statistics on how many searches are local intent are underreported, that it's lower, that it's really a big deal.
Well, I mean, it's just common sense, right? I mean, my entire kind of second career here has been about understanding how consumers use the internet to make purchase decisions, and most of those purchases happen in the physical world, right? I mean, people always talk about retail. Over 90% of retail is still happening in stores. I think now it's at 90 or 89%. When you factor in services, which is the bulk of the economy now, I think, most of those are fulfilled in the real world. All the people that come to your house to do things, all the things that you get done in the physical world that isn't a particular good that you're buying, those are all fulfilled in the world, right? You don't do most of those things online. The local economy is more than 10x the size of e-commerce. But what people do, almost to a person, is that they go online and they look at reviews, or they do searches, or they look up locations XYZ near me, and they're making those decisions about where to go, who to buy from, who to call, all based on content that's on the internet, content on websites, content in Google search results, to some degree content in social media, and a lot of reviews. And if we just think about that kind of from our own personal anecdotal perspective, it makes total sense that digital is driving huge trillions and trillions of dollars of purchase behavior, most of which is offline. E-commerce is an increasingly important part of the economy and for a lot of these businesses, and we can talk about that later. But it's really a small part of the overall internet economy. And so Google, to get back to your question, so what Google says is 20% of desktop searches carry a local intent, and then they say about 30% or a third, they sort of go back and forth, on mobile devices have some sort of local intent. And it really Google is being conservative. Google likes to sort of be, hedge a bit, and they're not going to sort of go, reach beyond and say something a little bit too risky or controversial. But in sort of private conversations or private settings like conferences that haven't been public and other contexts, they've alluded to bigger numbers. somebody was saying 46% was a number that was cited by a Googler. We don't really know the context exactly of that. Marissa Mayer, who used to be at Google and sort of at one point was in charge of all their local offerings before she went on to be CEO of Yahoo, said on a blog post that 40% of mobile searches had a local intent. So Google uses different methodologies to figure this out. But if you just look at the common sense, people look online, they buy stuff offline. And if you consider where people purchase things, it's a much, much bigger number. Are you going to buy a refrigerator online? Maybe you would, maybe I would. Most people wouldn't. Are you going to buy a piece of furniture online? Most of the time, not. Maybe a mattress now. But you're sure as heck going to use the internet to do that research.
Sure.
Yeah, and you can see why your advice to let's focus on Google My Business during this downtime is so important. Now, Google's made some changes in Google My Business to actually help businesses during this time to communicate some operational changes. Can you go over those with our listeners?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's been a ton of stuff. I mean, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to capture the full chronology, but so Google has, Google sent everybody home like most other businesses that still had employees, and they reduced their support staffing. So what they did is they shut down all new reviews and Google Q&A. Reviews are sort of starting to show up in fits and starts a little bit, but mostly reviews have been shut down. Q&A has been shut down. They've encouraged businesses to either mark themselves temporarily closed or to indicate special hours, change business descriptions, update information so that you can convey whatever you need to your customers. They've created a special category of Google Posts for COVID-19. I'm trying to think of other stuff off the top of my head that they've done. There's been a lot of stuff. I mean, it's pretty much week to week as the situation evolves.
How do you think Google My Business will change in the post-COVID era when we're facing a world where movie theaters might be different than we realize? People might have different ways of doing business with restaurants, grocery stores. What do you personally see in how Google My Business will adapt to what's next?
Well, I think there are two immediate responses to that. And they both involve acquisitions that Google made. So earlier, it was probably in 2019 actually, but it might have been early this year, Google bought a company called Pointy, an Irish company. And Pointy was a tool essentially that connected to a small retailer's point of sale system to help get inventory online. So, as things are sold, the system captures that data, uses an algorithm, and gives a kind of a ongoing inventory that can be then, pushed out in various places online into ads, landing pages, and elsewhere. So that will help small businesses communicate their inventory to the public. That's an important thing, especially right now when there are product shortages and people don't know where they can get toilet paper or paper towels or certain kinds of goods. So going forward, and especially as businesses need to diversify and get into e-commerce a bit more, that may be that kind of online inventory, landing pages with real-time inventory. I think we'll see more of that. Then the second thing is transactions generally. Google has over the last couple of years been turning Google My Business into a platform that enables commerce transactions. So they have this Reserve with Google program where third-party partners can help business owners enable online food ordering and booking and scheduling, things like that. So a variety of categories of businesses. You can book an appointment or you can order food. This mirrors something that Google's doing with shopping more broadly. They're hosting the transaction. They're trying to drive more transactions directly through Google. And this speaks to a larger trend integrating the online and the offline, as we were sort of talking a little bit before. But they bought a company recently called the Ordering App, which is a sort of back office system, sort of like Pointy for retailers, but for restaurants, where you can enable food ordering, and it has other functions too. So this is Google trying to help small businesses kind of become I'm going to coin a phrase here: commercified, e-commerce enabled. And I think we'll see more of that, much more of that, through Google My Business, kind of going forward after this.
Yeah, it really does look like Google My Business is going to become the fulcrum of the engagement with consumers in the future. And so therefore it becomes even a higher priority for business owners to master that as a marketing channel.
Exactly. I mean, Google refers to it as an engagement platform and an engagement tool. And, they've added some social features to it. So they see it sort of holistically as you say, as a sort of a kind of a hub for business owners. And it's a critical, if you had to pick one, that would be the one.
As long as it doesn't take any more organic space.
Well, we can't, that's a whole other topic about zero click, but one of the things you can do in a zero click context is you can optimize for all the different Google properties and Google features, SERP features, and Google My Business is one of them.
We should go into that for folks listening to the show for the first time, this idea of zero click. Talk about that concept and what does that mean to businesses?
Yeah, so the sort of simplest way to put it is a zero-click search is a search in which the user gets an answer without clicking through to a website. And these often arise in the context of factual queries like, what's the weather in New York? Who was the 16th president of the United States? Who won Best Picture in 2020? These sort of questions that are commonly asked. Google will have an info box or an answer box that will often, have a kind of a rich media in it. You'll see images, you'll see text. Sometimes those are so-called featured snippets, but it's a lot of content right at the top of the page. Doesn't require a user to click through to get that information. There are other features of the page that will also serve that function. You ask a question like, how many calories in a hamburger, you'll often get that answer straight away. So people don't have to go deeper to get that information. And what that now represents about 50% of search results, according to jump shot data that was pretty widely publicized last year. So fully half or slightly more than half of search results don't require a click through to a website. It's a higher percentage in the blended result is 50. It's slightly lower in desktop, slightly higher in mobile.
And kind of like the pandemic statistics, that number becomes even more meaningful when you look at how fast it's grown.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that data in front of me, but it has grown very, very fast. But I mean, I think, to put it in some historical context, this has been evolving over basically a decade. I mean, Google started with universal search, where it started integrating sort of vertical search results from its other properties, roughly a decade ago, and adding more and more rich content into the search results page. So we've seen gradual. It's accelerated in the recent past, but it's been building for a long time. And Google, marketers don't like it because it takes away from clicks to their website. But Google says it's just serving users. I mean, I think there's, the truth is somewhere in between. But it's been going on, or a version of it's been going on for quite a long time.
Well, let me ask you this: is if we see this more and more in the future, where will we gauge as marketers? I mean, obviously, if the rich answers provides action you're wanting them to take, then whether it's effective there or on the website, how are marketers in the future going to gauge their success for, say, like an SEO? They're not clicking through.
So that's a little bit of a challenge. There are analytics. I mean, Google My Business has Google My Business Insights, which is flawed, but does give you visibility on actions consumers take. Sure. And there are actions, calls, clicks, directions. Snippets will drive clicks. Snippets. There was one report that was released by an agency called Proficient Digital that actually argued that featured snippets at the top of the page, the text, were click neutral, because sometimes they drove a lot of clicks, sometimes they didn't. So there are still clicks happening. Google is providing a lot of analytics, on ads. So ultimately, one answer is you got to buy more ads, and then you'll get the analytics. For an organic, marketer, for an SEO, you'll have to cobble together stuff. People will say you're not looking for clicks. Ultimately, you're looking for customers. So
Right.
it's really about driving whatever it is, qualified leads or transactions or whatever your ultimate metric or KPI is. And it's people fixate on clicks, but you should be fixating or focusing on customers and acquisition and lifetime value, all that stuff.
Right. I guess my point was, if it's in the zero position and they're giving an answer, whereas if they came to a blog post on a website and might bring them into like a service page or a product page,
Yep.
that you don't have that path anymore,
Right. No, and that's just straight up true. I mean, I think it's harder. It's harder. You don't have as much control.
Right.
Greg, you recently participated, I think you authored an article in Marketing Land, and you asked several experts, how can they make their COVID-19 content unique? Because everybody's trying to crank out COVID-19 related content right now. What did you get as the takeaway from those experts, and how to make content in this COVID-19 era unique?
Yeah, I think there are a number of takeaways. The short answer is that there's no magic answer or solution. I think part of it is your attitude, and part of it is your knowledge. So one of the things that people said was, paradoxically, don't create content for the sake of content. Just don't be pumping content out into the world just so you have content. But then at the same time, the recommendation is maintain a regular schedule. Do publish on a regular schedule. But use the kind of filter or test or threshold. How does this help my customers? Is this going to bring value to my customers? That's sort of the primary consideration.
Right.
Are you writing something that they're going to use, or that's going to be useful to them? And I'm sorry, did you want to jump in?
No, I was just going to say, in my mind, a common practice for a lot of content writers is research from other articles. In my mind, if you can't create something that is an added value or information, should you even put that out there?
Well, the
it's
short
more
answer
of the same.
is no. Yeah, the short answer is no. I mean, so often you'll get a provocative headline or an interesting headline, and then you go in and it's some stupid listicle that says nothing interesting or new. It's just this bland, set of high-level points.
Yeah.
But one of the points that was made to me is, what do you have as a marketer or as a platform or as a technology company that's unique? Do you serve a particular industry? Do you have unique data? Do you have some sort of unique point of view that you can bring to your content? I mean, when I think about writing, and I don't always do this, obviously. I mean, I'm imperfect, but I try to really sort of get beyond some of the platitudes that clog up a lot of our marketing content, and just what's real, or what's really important, or what's really interesting about this thing that I'm looking at. So is there something unique that you can bring to the content?
Is there a greater danger to being self-promotional right now in this coronavirus era than there was previously?
I don't know if I would say there's a greater danger of being self-promotional. I think the danger, I see what you're saying. I think the danger is there if you are self-promotional. So I think consumers there's a lot of research that has been done very quickly about what consumers or what users want from brands and companies. They want them to help. They want them to be helpful. They want them to make people feel comfortable. They want all these things. They have high expectations. And if you screw that up as a brand or as a marketer, there are some consequences that may not have existed before. So if you come out and you do something which seems nakedly self-promotional, people are going to have a very negative reaction to that. It's pretty tough because everybody, there's a lot of free products now. A lot of companies are allowing you to use their tool or their thing for free. And Uberall has a version of that as well, around listings. And there's always sort of a mixed message there. It's like, here's our thing, and it's free for a limited time, and that's great because it's helpful and it gives people access to something they'd have to pay for. But then there's always this sort of lurking feeling that there's some manipulative dimension, or it's really about acquisition or something. And so it's really
right.
tough. It's really tough for brands to negotiate that, I think.
Yeah, it always feels like there's a string attached somewhere.
Yep.
Greg, how are you seeing consumers change in this era? Are you noticing anything different either in query data or in channel use data?
Yeah, so in both kind of categories, right? I mean, so everybody's stuck at home, and one interesting thing is that desktop usage, this is Microsoft data, desktop usage has gone back up, right? So everything was sort of migrating to mobile devices, and we've seen, at least according to their data, some return to the desktop. People are sitting in front of their, doing work all day to the extent that they can, and sitting in front of these desktop computers. So there's been some uptick there. Also, a lot of social media usage. People are using social media to connect even more than before. And so it's kind of people that were sour on Facebook or dissatisfied with social media have kind of returned to it because out of necessity. So there's that kind of thing. Search is being used very, very, very heavily for obvious reasons. It's always sort of an initial point of entry into any research or any kind of content inquiry, but especially these days. And the kinds of queries that people are doing reflect their current situation. Now, Google, sort of has organized the behavior into three categories. Google has sort of said there's three kind of groupings of activity that they're seeing. What they call immediate needs, new, quote unquote, new day-to-day, and then emerging behaviors. And the immediate needs is like stores open, essential services, food delivery, grocery delivery, financial aid, that kind of stuff, right? How do I apply for unemployment? That kind of stuff, right? That's immediate needs, kind of lizard brain stuff. And then new day-to-day is like cooking and recipes and productivity and how to stay healthy at home and interesting things to do with, and in this sort of vicarious environment that we're in. And then these emerging behaviors are they claim, or not claim, they say about, how to bring the outside world in. So like, entertainment, virtual travel, museums, fitness and beauty. And so they've kind of conceptualized it that way. But I mean, I think another way to look at it is just people have kind of gone from wants to needs, a lot of discretionary items to, flat out survival stuff, and then stuff that helps them work at home, video, Zoom and that kind of stuff.
Let's flip that question on behalf of businesses. So now business owners, marketing people, they're at home and they're watching some of these major brands produce what are kind of called user-generated content. You're watching the Tonight Show produced by an iPhone. Does that affect businesses coming out of this COVID-19 era? Do they all of a sudden say, hey, this content generation thing really isn't that difficult?
It's an interesting idea, and I think hopefully would be the answer. I mean, I think people have been intimidated by production costs and high production values, and I think these examples, as you say, may inspire small businesses in particular to do some of these things themselves. And video is an incredibly powerful medium. You can do something with an iPhone, upload it on YouTube, and pretty effectively market yourself. I mean, that sounds easier than it is a little bit, but I hope what you're saying is true. I haven't seen any direct evidence of it, but I've got to believe that your instinct is right, and people will take inspiration from that.
That's true. And we say Google My Business is the most undervalued, important channel that a small business owner can focus on during this time. Maybe YouTube is not that far behind, as Correct. They have to figure out how to sell their product without face-to-face meetings, without face-to-face interactions. Maybe it's going to be YouTube.
Exactly. I mean, YouTube has always been kind of the number two, search engine. People always say that YouTube is the second largest search engine, but you're exactly right. Video is a very powerful way to communicate stuff that you can't communicate in text, demo products, And back to the zero-click thing, that's a way to optimize for the search engine, the search results page, because YouTube content often shows up very high on the high in the SERP. And so I think you're exactly right.
All right. Well, it's time to take a break. When we get back, we're going to do Who Influences the Influencer. It's sponsored by Directive. You can go to directiveconsulting.com. But when we get back, we're going to ask you who influences you after these messages.
Hey, Brennan here, founder of the U.S. Search Award-winning SEO agency, Pixel Cut Labs. We're launching a new video series, and we're inviting the Search Talk Live family to get involved. So here's the deal. I'm opening up a group of one-on-one consulting sessions to fix your SEO roadblocks. If you're okay with us publishing a recording of the call on our website to promote our expertise, the consulting session is on me. If you're facing a crawl issue, struggling with creating effective content, or just need some help identifying the right keywords to target, go ahead and take the next 2 minutes, visit bit.ly/SEO call. There's no spaces, no capitals, no hyphens, bit.ly/SEO call, and tell me what you need help with. If I think I can help, I'll send over a few times for our consulting call, and you can choose what works for you. So again, the link is bit.ly/SEO call, no spaces, no hyphens, all lowercase, and it will take about 2 minutes to fill out. I'll bring everything to the table to help you break through the barriers you're facing, as long as we can use the recording of our call to promote our knowledge. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Directive is an industry-leading search marketing agency fully focused on helping B2B marketing teams increase their results. If you're looking to increase your marketing qualified leads and decrease your cost per acquisition for search engines, I'd highly recommend you take a look at their site. We've actually had their CEO, Garrett Marguth, on the show, and I can honestly say these guys are doing some great stuff. I hear that they even have their own analytics system that lets you correlate your SEO, PPC, or content efforts directly to revenue. If you're a B2B company and thinking about switching agencies, or if you're in-house and need help, I'd give Directive a look. Visit directiveconsulting.com or call 949-214-4024. Again, that's 949-214-4024. Again, that's Directive at directiveconsulting.com.
Your website analytics data probably feels like this, but it could feel like this. Making sense of all the website data available to you hasn't been easy until now. Smialytics transforms your website analytics data into easy-to-understand, memorable photographs. You pick your own photo theme. Smialytics, S-M-Y-L-E, lytics. Like analytics, only happier. And it's free at smialytics.com. Want to know how your website is doing? Get the big picture with pictures. It's the easiest and most enjoyable way to understand your website data. No charts, no graphs, no cost. Sign up today. Smialytics, S-M-Y-L-E, lytics, like analytics. Only happier at smialytics.com.
Get your questions in on Twitter. Type hashtag SearchTalkLive and your question. Now back to the show.
All right, Greg. We want to know who influences you.
So I've been thinking about that, and it's really tough. I don't have any direct inspirations in the marketing world, I would say. There's nobody within, well, you guys, of course, but beyond,
okay,
beyond
you can
that,
come back.
yeah. Beyond that, I'm not looking to any particular marketer. I mean, there's a lot of really smart, creative, thoughtful people in the marketing world, and I'm impressed when I hear them speak or see them. But I things that are really interesting to me are kind of outside of the scope of marketing. I'm a big. You want me to name names, so I'll give you a name who's of somebody that I think is really intellectually interesting. Do you know who Michael Pollan is? He's the food writer and food culture writer, Botany of Desire. He wrote a book on hallucinogens recently, and coffee is his most recent thing on caffeine. He's a pretty interesting guy, but I like people like that who are outside of the digital marketing arena. I listen to a lot of, I mean, I could say people like Bill Gates. One of my favorite talks is the Steve Jobs Stanford commencement address. I don't know when it was. It's years ago. Where he talks about the three failures that taught him some of the greatest lessons of his life. That was very powerful. So there's a lot of different things that influence my thinking, and I like to bring lots of outside influences, history, art, etc., philosophy into my day-to-day thinking, because it kind of, I would feel a little bit claustrophobic if I was only reading about marketing. I never read about marketing, like these marketing books that people write. It just would be too claustrophobic for me.
Earlier in the show, Greg, you very well pointed out that some of the things that Google is doing in Google My Business are literally, not figuratively, changing week by week. How do you keep up with changes like that, particularly in the industry that you're in?
Well, Google is doing a decent job of publicizing those things on their own. They're pushing out a lot of PR. They're writing a lot of blog posts. It's almost too many. And then there are a lot of third-party, really smart marketers who are chronicling what Google's doing, who are tracking it. I mean, in the local space, Mike Blumenthal and Joy Hawkins, who are digital marketers, local digital marketers, are capturing a lot of that. Bright Local's doing a very good job of that. So there's a bunch of people who are capturing those changes and helping to expose them. I'm also on a Slack group with a bunch of local SEOs. I'm not a local SEO, but these guys are. And they're a terrific source of insight and updates and perspective. So David Mim is there, and Joy is in there, and Carrie Hill, and Darren Shaw, lots of people. Really, really good group of local marketers in there.
I know one area that you are very well steeped in is reviews and review solicitation. Give us your best tips for review solicitations, because that's a place where a lot of business owners go wrong and actually take a step back from their efforts rather than a step forward. What are your best tips?
So we have to carve out Yelp separately from this discussion, because Yelp has the strictest rules, and they don't want anybody to ask anybody for reviews. But outside of that, there are some best practices, and you absolutely should be asking customers for reviews. There are lots of tactics that people use. Fundamentally, you should not gate any reviews, meaning you shouldn't channel on dissatisfied customers down one path and satisfied customers to another. On balance, if you ask all your customers for reviews, more likely than not, they'll be positive. That's what the data show overwhelmingly. There are people who suggest, well, you can prompt your customers with certain kinds of language, and they'll reflect that back in the reviews, and that's like an SEO trick. But I don't think you need to do that. I mean, I think you need to think of your reviews as a way to get customer feedback, which is sort of its most fundamental aspect. You want your customers to talk back to you, but then after that, you need to get them to put that content on the different platforms. And it's really the key ones are Google My Business, Yelp, Facebook, and then if there is some vertical, TripAdvisor is important for a lot of people, and then there are other verticals specific to the industry where it's important. And you just want to ask people in an ethical way, hey, you review us here on these platforms. You can provide them with links in an email, or you can send people to a landing page with links. There are different ways to do it, and there's a lot of advice online. But you want to be ethical. You don't want to reward people with financial incentives or compensate them in any way that's against the rules. Most people will be happy to give you that feedback. Some people take you down a path with a survey and then dump you in a place where you can, link to a review site. There are different ways to do it, but you want to be ethical. You want to be not manipulative in any way with people.
And from what I can tell from the updates that GMB has been doing, that social interaction between the reviews and responses you give have a lot to do with where you sit in GMB, that engagement, as far as responding to reviews, whether good or bad.
Yeah, so it's critical to respond to reviews. It's good that you mentioned that. So it's critical to respond to reviews. Negative reviews should be responded to, depending on the intensity of the review, faster or not as fast, but in any case within 24 hours. Yeah. There's no evidence that review response rates, meaning if you respond faster or slower, have any impact on SEO, but the engagement does appear to impact SEO. Certainly reviews do. Yeah. Better reviewed businesses are going to rank. But it's just good practice, right? Think about it people tend to get into this sort of SEO fetish mindset, and they should just really think of things in common sense terms. If your customers are telling you something, you want to be responsive. If it's critical, you want to respond to it. If it's favorable, you want to say thanks. You want to engage with them. And just handle it in a common sense way.
I mean, what I was referring to is in the local 3-pack.
Yep.
Not SEO wise, but in the local 3-pack, ranking your business higher isn't based on your reviews, but the interaction between you and those reviews. Okay.
It's based on the scores, it's based on the volume of reviews. A number of factors play into it, but more reviews and better scores and responding to reviews equals higher rankings. Basically, yes. That's the short version.
Yes.
So, Greg, if you could give and it's going to vary by industry, so nobody listening to the show should panic with your answer. It's going to vary widely by industry. But in general, what would you describe as a business ratio of transactions to reviews, let's say over a period of time, that you think they're doing a good job with review solicitation? Should they be getting, in an ideal world, 2% of their transactions to generate a review, 20% of their transactions to generate a review? What is a general sense so a business owner can say, yeah, I'm kind of in the ballpark of doing this well?
Gosh, you stumped me because I don't have a benchmark for that. I mean, I'm sure one exists, but I can't pull one out of my posterior here in real time. I mean, I think you want to keep reviews flowing, and you want to cross a certain threshold, because consumers will look at businesses that have more reviews and more recent reviews more favorably than older reviews or fewer reviews. But I can't give you a percentage. But I'm sure that I'm not even sure that research exists. Somebody has it somewhere, but I don't know if I've ever seen that published.
Interesting. But I think you've made a powerful point, though, that, and I think Robert and I are guilty of this, that maybe SEOs have commoditized reviews as an element of SEO. And maybe business owners say, well, what is a review? Oh, a review is a thing you do for SEO. When in truth, a review is a powerful, fundamental business practice in which you learn about what's working and what's not working within your business.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You have to have some sort of discipline around this, just by virtue of the fact that this is the world we live in. Most businesses, especially small businesses, don't have a review program. And so you need to pay some attention to this kind of stuff, but that's what I would argue. It's ultimately about customer communication and a conversation with your customer. And if you handle that correctly, then to some degree, these other things will play out in a favorable way. I mean, in the old days, it was all about word of mouth, right? If you were doing a great job, people would recommend you. That's what this is online. You need to continue to do a great job, be sincere in your outreach to your customers, and just try and deliver the best product or service you can, recognizing that there are always going to be some psychopaths in the world who write a negative or hysterical review. And in fact, that's not a bad thing. I mean, for eons, business owners didn't believe that negative reviews would be helpful to them. But if consumers only see, uniformly positive reviews, 5-star reviews across the board, they're skeptical of the value of those reviews. So you need some negative reviews, frankly, to give your positive reviews credibility.
especially when you respond to those negative reviews, it kind of shows, even though it's negative, it shows that you care about your client or your customer.
Yeah, and there are people who would argue that the review response is not for that customer. I don't hold this point of view, but it's not for that customer. It's for the future customers who are reading that response. Right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, and many of these platforms have tools like Yelp where you can take the communication private. So if somebody has a really serious problem, you can kind of take it outside of the public view and resolve it. But yeah, you're right. It's really about, I mean, you want to deliver the best customer experience you can, and that's the only way for these small businesses to really ultimately compete against bigger competitors.
Right.
It's 2020, Greg. Do you still find that businesses fear that psychopath, and that's why they're not actively pursuing reviews?
Well, I think a lot of them are just not well informed about the role that reviews play in the whole process. I mean, everybody sort of gets that reviews are important and that consumers rely on reviews, but they don't fully understand how reviews function in the Google algorithm in terms of the 3-pack and why things get ranked the way that they do. And many small service businesses in particular, just it's a time sink for them, or they don't really understand quite the intensity around reviews for consumers. They get it conceptually, but they don't get it operationally, and they're not executing against it.
All right, it's that time.
All right, Greg, it's time for Believe It or Leave It, one of the more popular parts of Search Talk Live. We're going to give you 3 statements we found on the internet, and we're going to ask you to tell our audience whether they should believe it or whether they should leave it. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm very excited about this.
All right.
Unlike the earlier segment, I can say something this time.
Okay. All right, here we go. Number 1, having a blog post on your COVID-19 operational changes in your business will positively impact your Google organic ranking now.
Leave it. I mean, the answer is qualified. Potentially yes, but if I have to say either, I would say leave it.
Okay. Question number 2. Google has relaxed Google My Business guidelines and is allowing the word open in the business name of essential businesses.
What's the first option? Yes to that. Accept it. Take it. Grab it.
And do you think that's true? They have done it?
They were allowing spamming in the business name to communicate whether the business was not whether they had takeout, for example. So
yes,
yeah.
There is a little bit more liberty now in the name of businesses. Yeah. Now it'll be interesting to see how they crack down on that. They will eventually,
as things return to whatever normal looks like after this.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, number 3, believe it or leave it. That was a good one, Robert. In Google My Business, it is better to change the standard hours to not open each day than to use the new temporary closed function.
Also tough, but leave it. Google has said that temporarily closed will not hurt anybody's rankings. So they want you to use either adjusted hours or temporarily closed. So if you're not open, I would argue temporarily closed.
Good advice. And just a reminder for everybody listening to the show to go into your Google My Business profile and make sure that you have the most up-to-date current information displaying right now for consumers.
And let me circle back to that blog post one, the first one. So will a COVID-19 blog post help you with rankings? It could, depending on the quality of the blog post and the content of the blog post. But a blog post by itself, back to the content discussion, isn't necessarily going to help you rank if you're just pumping out a bunch of, superficial content.
Right. And I think the content has to be related to what consumers are looking for, because we are seeing a little bit of query data, people searching things like car dealer who offers virtual test drives So it's got to be lined up with how consumers are adapting to what they're looking for.
That's exactly right. And that's where you can use a tool like Google Trends to get some insight. You should be looking at query logs and other tools like that to get a sense of what your customers are looking for and then create content around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was just doing a project for a client yesterday, and the query volume for teledoc, telemedicine, doctors that do virtual office visits is through the roof in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that's one of the really interesting sort of lasting, a whole other show that you guys could do would be speculating around what changes we're going to see after the fact, and that's probably one of them. A lot more telemedicine, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, and that that advice for blog posts pretty much goes across the board for any topic. I mean, really, it doesn't have to be the topic of COVID-19, but it could, anything you approach, you should be approaching it that way. If you can add value, then
yep. But so often people just get into this. There's this marketing machine that kicks in, right? With scheduled posts and scheduled content, and people are just pumping stuff out because their competitors are, and people don't stop and take a breath and really think, is this meaningful in any way, or is this just some kind of perfunctory thing that I'm putting out because of, everybody else is doing the same thing.
Right.
And also, when you're pumping out this content, you want to obtain the goal of that website. It's not just throw content out to throw content out.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So next we have the Search Talk Live tattoo.
So, Greg, your best piece, your most succinct piece of advice that you want to leave our listeners with based on the content of the show that's memorable. Remember, it's got to be tattooable. Robert gets all these as tattoos, and ink space is limited right now on Robert's body. So what's your most succinct, most compelling piece of advice you can give our listeners?
I'm going to date myself, but ethical marketing rules. So that's like from the nobody says rules anymore unless it's like a retro cool thing. That's like from the disco era, pretty much. But I think more and more ethical behavior from companies, and that that extends from the way you treat your customers, the way you source your products, how you present yourself in the world. I think this is more and more the case that people have those expectations, and over the long term, those companies will hopefully win versus the evildoers.
Amen to that.
Amen. Yeah, and we've always said, everybody says, your relationships, the strength of your relationships is discovered during the hard times, not the easy times. So a lot of businesses will find out how well they've been doing at managing their customer relationships during these tough times.
Yeah, and you make a really important point that right now relationships really matter. Colleagues, customers, one of the big pieces of advice that we didn't get into is focus on your existing customers rather than trying to do acquisition at this point. Strengthen those relationships, pay attention to those people, and that will help you with them and also help you later on as they make recommendations of who to work with. And it really, good service, quality, following through with your promises, all that stuff really, really matters in a normal time, but especially now, I think.
Nice.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so great. Well, it's been great having you on the show. Lots of really good information. If people want to reach you, how can they do that? Or do you have a website? Or
Yeah, so I don't have a personal website anymore. I had a blog, screenwork.com, spelled with an E, W-E-R-K, the German spelling. Mm-hmm. For a long time, about 10 years, and then finally I just got pissed off at my web host and I was overworked, so I let it go. So that blog is gone. You can find me on Twitter at gsterling, G-S-T-E-R-L-I-N-G, or you can just email me at greg.sterling@uberall.com.
All right. Well, thanks again, man. It's been a great show. I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in and listening to the show. Remember, you can go to Twitter at Search Talk Live. You can also type hashtag Search Talk Live. If you have a question, we'll ask it live on the air. Greg, thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was an honor to be on with you guys. Great conversation.
Thanks to our sponsors to enable experts like Greg to participate in Search Talk Live.
All right. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Search Talk Live is brought to you by Pixel Cut Labs, a 2019 U.S. Search Award-winning SEO agency. Welcome to Page One. If you have a question about today's show or would like to be a sponsor, email Robert at searchtalklive.com. That's Robert at searchtalklive.com.